Hello everyone, welcome to Mountain State Films and Tunes. This is part one of our duo video series. This is focused on our thoughts of Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. Part two, which will be uploaded after this video, will be on the future of Tarantino. I'm Dylan McCarty, the social media manager and film critic of Mountain State Films and Tunes. This is J.R. Bennett, the co-founder and music writer of Mountain State Films and Tunes. Greetings. So we're both big Tarantino fans, clearly. And our bar was really high on this movie.
Yes, it was.
I think it's safe to say we both enjoyed it. We had a fun time.
We did. We did.
And
yeah.
before we get into it, what is your entry point to Tarantino? What was the film that introduced you, to him?
I would say the film that introduced me was Pulp Fiction. Pulp Fiction was really
the granddaddy.
was really what got me into wanting to see more of his, and it took me a while to figure out why his movies were structured like this.
Mm-hmm.
But like it kind of made me want to see more.
Sure.
It wanted me to see it had me wondering why he done it this way, but at the same time I wanted to see more on what the guy could do.
Sure. My beginning with Tarantino was Kill Bill. I was always into action, science fiction, and like movies that had a really hip vibe. And
Yeah.
Tarantino's movies are definitely action oriented and they have the humor.
Yeah.
And Kill Bill was a mashup of samurai tales, spaghetti westerns, and many other things. And I loved it. From then on, as I got older, I began to watch a lot of his stuff, and I really appreciated his writing.
Yeah.
Of course, he's a great director as well, but he is one of the best screenwriters of all time, in my opinion. And if he
Yeah.
goes on to write novels like he's talked about, he's going to be fantastic.
Oh yeah.
So, in terms of this movie, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, it feels very different from a lot of his other work. I think it feels most similar to Jackie Brown because the violence is more restrained.
Yeah.
And it is more focused on the emotions of the characters, the personal dilemmas the characters are connected to.
Yeah.
And it's not non-linear. I mean, it jumps around some, to the past, but it's mostly, linear.
Yeah.
How did you feel about the 1960s setting? Now, for me, I enjoyed the visual design. I thought he did a great job of immersing us into the world.
Yeah.
Bob Richardson's cinematography is phenomenal. Him and Tarantino once again strike gold, and it looks like the 1960s. The costume design, when I saw people walking down the streets, I thought this is the 1960s. This is 1969.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of times we're with Brad Pitt or Leonardo DiCaprio when they're in the car, and we see the streets. Now I think at times Tarantino goes a little too far. I think he more than immerses us into the setting and goes a little too far, and the story suffers a bit. But what did you think about the music of the movie? Because we hear the music on the radio a lot. What did you think of the soundtrack?
I think the soundtrack was great. You have bands that was big back then that a lot of people now would look down on. But, really back then, that was what they had. That was their jam.
Yeah.
If you had a Simon Garfunkel album and they had just came out with the song, you would basically be the talk of the guy.
Yep.
You'd be the talk of the town. If you had a Paul Revere and the Raiders shirt on and you're listening to Deep Purple and Simon Garfunkel on a tape, you're literally the popular guy. You're the main guy. And that was the style back then, and two, you also had the disco era,
Yep.
too, which that was what the Bee Gees thrived on, was the disco era. And, it was all just great.
Is there an artist you were surprised he didn't use? That maybe you thought, I'm surprised. That's interesting. He didn't use this guy or this artist.
I believe he had there was a vinyl in the movie. Don't quote me on this, but I believe there was a vinyl of the Monkees.
Okay.
That was featured, that was seen a little bit in that movie. And of course I'm not too familiar with the Monkees vinyl album covers.
Yeah.
But I'm familiar with their stuff, and I believe I've seen that.
Mm-hmm.
I couldn't make out the title on the vinyl, but I believe that's what it was. But I'm surprised he didn't use that.
Gotcha. That's interesting that you bring up the covers because Tarantino is a big fan of just entertainment, right?
Oh, yeah.
Movies, of course, but television and music. If you're a film fan or a fan of entertainment like we are, whether that be film, television, music, or pop culture, you're gonna love this movie because it has so many ties to the past. Iconic figures. Like even the radio stations it's broadcasting things that would have been happening in that era, and it goes on a lot. And I actually really dug it. The elongated scenes where we are on the TV set of the TV series DiCaprio's character is on.
Yeah.
There are really elongated sequences in that I found very intriguing and refreshing. There's a part where, and this was actually a scene me and you really enjoyed. We were talking about it, where he's talking to the young actress, and she's talking about her acting process, and it feels like we are on that set and we are meeting that actor for the first time.
Exactly.
And it feels like these actors, we are forced to meet other artists and get an idea of what their personality is like.
Exactly.
And then later, when they're filming, and me and you really love this, when they're on the Western set, we are actually following the actual fictional story in Tarantino's movie. And we're seeing it play out, and it goes on for a while. I think some people won't enjoy it. They'll say it's slow. I really enjoyed it because it gets you into that world of the characters. Now, at times, I think he goes a little too far with that. He's more focused on the world than building the story, and the characters aren't as emotionally well-rounded as they could have been. But man, in terms of that era and just the characters, like every Tarantino movie, the characters are great.
Yeah.
What did you think of the characters?
I think the characters are fantastic, and it's funny you brought up that Western part in that movie. It's funny because there's actually a music video of a Today artist by the name of Justin Moore, and he has a music video out where it is literally Western themed from back then.
Interesting.
And
check this out.
And the song is called "You Look Like I Need a Drink." Crazy name of the song, but I didn't come up with it. It's a good song, by the way. Yeah, just the theme of the video was Western theme, was Western like that, like John Wayne's Western.
Sure.
And when I saw that in Tarantino's video, that's what I immediately thought of, and it had me glued to that scene because I wanted to see where he would go with that.
This, by the way, guys, this is the king of segues. He just segued perfectly into this. Westerns.
Yeah.
This is very Western oriented because he's DiCaprio's character, Rick Dalton, used to be a big star on a Western TV show, and
Bounty Law.
Yes, and which Bounty Law, from what I've heard, is very much like Wanted Dead or Alive, which was Steve McQueen's Western series that he did.
It's
which
also
I find
the name of a Bon Jovi song.
Yes, yes, and the world that Tarantino creates. Speaking of westerns, Tarantino's a big fan of Sergio Leone, who made A Fistful of Dollars for a Few Dollars More, The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, Once Upon a Time in the West. This title, I always am going to think of Once Upon a Time in the West.
Yeah.
Because in Once Upon a Time in the West, it was about a transitional period in the West. It was getting to be the end of the gunslinger era. You have the train coming through, society is evolving.
Yeah.
And now you have the rise of the businessman.
Right.
And in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, it is a transitional period in Hollywood.
Yeah.
You have the old Western age, and it's dwindling. And now, like in 1969, we got kind of anti-hero movies. We get The Wild Bunch, we get Easy Rider, Midnight Cowboy, and then other films like True Grit, which is still Western, but very interesting films, and very much seem to be inspired by the Vietnam era. Yeah. And then that would pave the way for the 70s being a very gritty, dark decade in cinema. Yeah. What did you think of the transitional shift? Because Rick Dalton's character, or Rick Dalton, played by DiCaprio,
Leonardo,
is very frustrated with how the world is changing. He seems to be frustrated by hippie culture, because now we're in the midst of counterculture, the rise of hippie culture. Yeah. And there's a part in the movie where they say, we want you to look like a hippie. And he gets kind of mad because he wants to look like the prototypical gunslinger. Yeah. And you know, and I couldn't help but think of like Easy Rider with Dennis Hopper and Peter Fonda, how they have the hippie look, and in a way it's kind of a Western on wheels, the motorcycle. It's the birth of motorcycle movies, or, you know, the rise of motorcycle movies.
Right.
What did you think of that? The whole changing of the guard, the changing era. I found it very interesting.
I did too, and sometimes not not all people want to switch with the times.
It's a tough part of life.
Not all, especially when styles of movies change and music changes and all that. If you're interested in still one genre or one era, you can bring that.
Mm-hmm.
You can bring certain parts of that in the times changing, and you can make something of that.
For sure.
And and I want to say I agree with DiCaprio's choice of not wanting to change with the times.
It's hard to do.
But
yeah.
But if it's for the sake of your career, you're gonna want to do it, because if you don't, you could easily fade off.
That's interesting.
And as a rising actor, or an actor that's on top of their game like DiCaprio was, that's one thing you don't want to do. That's one fear that will be in your mind is fading off. But with DiCaprio, he did not want to change.
That's the
and when he was forced to change, he didn't like it. Like he tried to resist it, but he was powerless.
Isn't he? He's very stubborn, isn't he? Because
he's very and he didn't want to fade off. And when he knew he was facing that was when he that was pretty much when he was given that ultimatum, like, hey, either I change here or I fade off.
There's the.
And I don't want to fade off.
At the beginning. At the beginning, it's established that he can go over to Italy and make westerns, which is spaghetti westerns. So, like I was saying, fistful of dollars for a few dollars more, blah blah blah. Yeah. And he hates spaghetti westerns, even though some of the some of the spaghetti westerns are some of the best westerns ever made. But he's stubborn, and I found that just very interesting because his career is actually not bad. Because DiCaprio is playing a guy that's having kind of a crisis, isn't he? And it's horrible, but at the same time, it's funny because of how DiCaprio plays him. DiCaprio is such a likable presence.
And he keeps mentioning the fact that he was in Bounty Law.
Yeah, well, that's what he's known for.
He kept mentioning that in the movie, and everybody was just like, okay, I get it, you was in this, but here's what I want you to do. And DiCaprio, he wanted to do things similar to Bounty Law, because he knows, hey, if you give me something that's similar to this, I can thrive here. Because I can snap back to this and give you this.
The funny thing is, the duo, Brad Pitt and DiCaprio, and they're great together.
That is a great action duo, actually. You have DiCaprio that can be more serious and more straight common, and he can go off when he needed to go off. He can rant when he needed to rant. And you got Brad Pitt, who is literally, he can be the guy that goes everywhere. He can be serious, he can be action, he can be comedy. He's just one of those guys that goes everywhere. And one thing I found different that I was starting to get used to was Quentin Tarantino did not make a cameo in this. And that's one thing I found differently.
I actually think, I thought one time I saw him, and it was in like a footage type scene when they're looking at footage. I don't know if it's him. I'd have to go back and watch it. I hope it is, because I love just seeing him.
Yeah.
It's just fun seeing him on the screen. I'm not sure. I hope it is, but I'm not quite sure.
If it is, I didn't see it.
It was really quick, because I got a glimpse, and I was like, is that him? And then it was gone. It cut to something else.
Like I said, if he did do it, I might catch it.
Like other great duos, like whether it be Lethal Weapon, Kiss Kiss Bang Bang, The Nice Guys, it's always great to have two characters who are very different, because then their differences come to the forefront and they have to deal with one another.
Yeah.
And DiCaprio is very depressed, but his career is actually pretty good. But then you have Brad Pitt, who's being weighted down by a past event. And really his career is pretty much done, wouldn't you say? Like, he's not having much success, but he seems to be cool with it for some reason, and it's very ironic.
He's satisfied with what he's done, but he wants more.
Yeah. Well, and I think Pitt is just. They establish he's a war hero.
Yeah.
And he's clearly a very good fighter. And he's just at peace to where life has brought him.
Exactly.
It seems.
Exactly.
What did you think of Sharon Tate, Margot Robbie playing Sharon Tate?
I think she done great. She
I agree.
She kind of gave you an inside look of just a little bit in her life, like her personality and the fact she's not selfish, which some actors nowadays are.
That's true.
And really that's not good for your fan base.
Agreed.
There's even some musicians now that's selfish, and it's like, why?
Yeah.
Why are you selfish? You're going against the people that got you where you are.
Yeah, and you're very lucky to be doing what you're doing.
Exactly. You're very lucky you got this far. And I think Margot Robbie done really great.
For sure.
When Tarantino selected her to play that, I could see a lot of people was kind of on the was kind of like on a balance beam with it because they didn't know where she could go. But oh no, I think Margot Robbie really transformed into Sharon Tate, and
Oh yeah.
and really, if you don't realize it's her, you'd actually think you're looking at the actual Sharon Tate.
When they announced that she was going to play Sharon Tate, because I had heard rumblings about it before.
Yeah.
I love it. Well, number one, she looks exactly like her, but number two, and most importantly, Margot Robbie's a great actress.
Exactly.
You look at something like Suicide Squad, where she's like the epitome of the devil in a way. Or you could say she's the devil's right-hand girl, and that she's connected to the Joker. But in this, she is a very welcoming presence. There's a great scene, and I'm sure Tarantino wrote it. I'm sure it wasn't just included, but Margot plays it so well, and it's kind of shot from a distance, and she gives someone that's wanting to hitch a ride. She gives them a lift.
A complete stranger.
And she's a big Hollywood star. Like, yeah, she doesn't have a ton of films under her belt, but she's a big name. And she gives this person a ride, and by the time the person gets out of the car, they're having, like, a conversation and wishing each other well. It feels like they know each other.
Exactly.
Within, maybe 30-minute drive, I don't know. But it was a great scene. And a lot of people are complaining that she doesn't have a lot to do. She doesn't have a lot of dialogue. I think that Tarantino was trying to go for the fact that I don't want to give you too much of Sharon Tate because she was taken from us, but I want to show you that she was a performer with a ton of potential. She was very free-spirited, and she was a very great person. And I can actually really appreciate that. But I almost wish she was fleshed out a little bit more and had a little more to do, because I think then she... in a way, it does feel like a little bit of a missed opportunity that she doesn't have more to do.
Mm-hmm.
She could truly, that character could truly be a very iconic character. But I really enjoyed Margot Robbie's portrayal. I thought she was great. What did you think of the whole Charles Manson scenario?
I think you could have used him more.
You could have really
used him. You could have used him more. I understand, him coming. Him driving to the cities, like an introduction to him. I understand that, I get that, but it took us to Spawn Ranch. And when you think of Spawn Ranch, the first thing you come to is Charles Manson.
Yeah.
And that's where I think you could have used Manson good.
Mm-hmm.
And honestly, for a second, there was a guy on the Spawn Ranch scene that you could have mistaken for Manson.
That's a good point.
But if you didn't realize when they said his name, you'd be like, okay, that's not Charles.
Yeah,
that's not who I thought it was.
Yeah.
But you could easily mistake him for that.
That's a great point.
And honestly, when we came to Spawn Ranch, I thought I was going to see more of him.
Yeah.
I thought I was going to see more of Manson, but sadly enough, we didn't. And I feel Tarantino could have used a little bit more of him there.
That sequence.
I think it would have made that more scene come to light more.
Agreed.
Because you're literally walking into Manson's madhouse, pretty much.
That sequence at Spawn Ranch, we both really enjoyed. It is tense.
Exactly, it is.
Because you get the feeling anything goes here. Because Brad Pitt's character, and no spoilers, but it's in the trailer. Brad Pitt's character literally walks into a desert-filled hell, in Spawn Ranch, and Tarantino, a lot of people have talked about, well, he's just focused on violence. No, he's focused on the communication between individuals, but he also is great at suspenseful scenes. You know, you look at Reservoir Dogs, the Mexican standoff at the end. It's not so much the violence that makes the scene; it's the build-up, the fact that we know violence is going to ensue, but it doesn't. Inglourious Bastards, where they're in the tavern in the basement, and
where Brad Pitt gives the rules on fighting in a basement.
And yes, and you can feel that something is going to give, like because you have German soldiers German soldiers in a tavern. The American soldiers, well, I guess technically British and American, but they're working for the Americans.
Right.
They're undercover as German soldiers, and you can feel, you know, the walls literally caving in. The German soldiers are starting to suspect. Hateful Eight is very much people sitting around talking, but you know crap's going to hit the fan eventually.
Oh, yeah. You know.
And that Spawn Ranch scene is great. I don't mind so much they didn't show Manson because it's almost a great appetizer. You know what I mean? You're seeing the world Charles Manson's in, and it's dirty. It's like everyone's really sweaty and kind of oily. You know what I mean? You can tell the living conditions aren't great. And when you go into when you go into Spawn's house, how dirty it is. There's like a rat stuck to a sticky trap. It's just really nasty. There's a lot of visual cues there that really sets it up. I think the ending. Me and you were a little we loved the ending, but we were a little disappointed that it didn't necessarily go the way we suspected. And we don't mean that we're critiquing it because it didn't go the way we wanted. We just think it could have used a little more of a specific person. That's fair to say. We don't want to give too much away, but we thought it could have went to the next level after it ends because it's so good, but we thought, is it going to go to the next thing?
The ending is so good to where you don't even know if it's the ending or not.
Yeah.
By the way the ending was, you think, okay, there's going to be a next scene coming up, and then all of a sudden the credits roll.
That is true.
And it's like, oh, this could have been carried out so much. But all in all, like, you really can't blame Tarantino for doing that because he ended it on such a great action scene, and he followed it up with humor.
Yeah.
That really, you just have to love it. You really have to clench on to that and really make you thrive more of that. But looking back, if you end an action scene with really great humor, you could have a masterpiece is right there.
That is a great point. The conversation that ensues after the great action scene is honestly almost as good as the actual action scene because it's so funny.
And the guy that DiCaprio talks to,
Emile Hirsch,
and in that movie, if you're not familiar with his work, he was in Lone Survivor, great movie. He was in Alpha Dog along with Justin Timberlake.
Yep.
Also, that movie's based on true events. Great movie, by the way. He was also in Lords of Dogstown, if I'm not mistaken.
Oh, yeah, okay.
Which is a skateboarding movie, I believe. It's been a while since I've seen it. But he's got a good range of work.
He's not in it much, but when he is, it's great.
Exactly.
And he's more so at the forefront at the end, isn't he? Because he's kind of a background character, like he's moving around Sharon Tate's house a lot and stuff.
Yeah, and he's got... And there's also another guy in there that DiCaprio works with on a movie set who he was also in The Girl Next Door. He was in Hitman, which I love that movie because it's based off the video game.
Oh, yeah.
And just that actor, I think his name's Timothy?
Timothy Olyphant.
Yeah.
He's very well known for Deadwood and Justified.
I call him Hitman.
Yeah.
Because that's the movie he was in. And really, that movie, I'm not going to go into that movie, but it's, if you play the video game, you kind of know what the movie's like.
He is great in that movie. Because he plays a Western star who is kind of in the opposite parts of his career than DiCaprio, because he is a big star of a Western show now.
Exactly.
And there's even a shot of him riding off on a motorcycle, and you just think, this guy's got a bright future.
This guy's going somewhere. And two, you can, if you see Hitman and see him in that movie, just in that one standoff that he's in on that Western scene, you can kind of sense,
You can feel it.
okay, this is Hitman gone Western.
Yeah.
And just that quick snap of the gun that he does, you don't see that.
Yeah.
You won't see that, and it's just like, okay, no wonder this dude was in a Hitman movie. He's so great with a gun. It's like he's a natural gunslinger.
So, overall, it's safe to say you and I really enjoyed it. We weren't disappointed.
Not at all. Not one part of the movie was disappointing at all. It was all great, positive vibes, and it starts off on a neutral.
Yeah.
It would start you off on a neutral, like you could go either way, but it just hits you on a good standpoint, and then it just gets better and better, and then it gets good, and then at the very end,
it's chaos.
It's just basically like, I want to see more.
I do think Tarantino. I think the emotional circumstances he puts that the characters are in is great. I think that he could have went the extra mile, and they could have been even more emotionally effective.
One thing for certain is you can only go so far before you draw the audience, before you lose the audience interest, and Quentin Tarantino has a thing with making you want more of that story.
Yeah.
And that's basically what he dove into. He's like, I got their attention now, but I'm going to make them thrive more on this.
And I think, too, that he very much puts style over substance.
Exactly.
There's more of a priority. He is more concerned with the style of this film than the substance. And that's one of my negatives. Mm-hmm. And I do think, too, it's a little too long. I do think it's a little overlong, and it could be even leaner. Yeah. And that's, I love The Hateful Eight. I think it's a great movie. But I think what was keeping it from being even better was too long in spots. Same thing with Django. I really enjoy Django, but it's way too long. But this is another very good film to add to Tarantino's filmography. Yeah. And we really enjoyed it. You know, ladies and gentlemen, go out and see this movie and give it a shot. If you're a big fan of, you know, the realms of entertainment, film, television, music, even like radio, like we were talking about the radio stuff, you're going to really enjoy this movie. Go in, expect the unexpected, and you'll have a great time. Part 1 is concluding, but you can look forward to our next episode, which will be Part 2, and we will talk about potential projects for Tarantino in the future, and we will give our pick for what we'd like to see him do. Thanks, guys, and have a great one.